Welcome to Zoe Stories. My evil aunt made me live as a woman. My name is Alex Carter, and until recently, I thought I had a fairly normal life. I was 23, working a steady job as a junior architect in a small but reputable firm. I lived modestly in a quiet neighborhood, had a small circle of friends, and was in a relationship with Isabella, my girlfriend of 2 years. On the surface, everything seemed ordinary, but like most people, I had secrets. And some of those secrets were about to collide with forces I could never have anticipated. From an early age, I had always been fascinated by the idea of transformation. While my friends were obsessed with sports or video games, I was secretly drawn to fashion, makeup, and the subtle art of presenting myself differently. At first, it was harmless experimentation, trying on my sister's clothes when no one was home, applying a little eyeliner, adjusting a wig, and marveling at how different, and yet natural, it felt. I never understood why it thrilled me so much, only that it did. The feeling was intoxicating, a mix of vulnerability and exhilaration, as if I were seeing a side of myself the world was not meant to know. But life has a way of turning private pleasures into public challenges. My evil aunt, Claudia, had always been a thorn in my side. She was the kind of woman whose smile could freeze you in place, whose voice dripped with calculated menace. Claudia had taken over my parents' family business after their passing, and with her authority came a sharp sense of control that extended into every corner of my life. She had always disapproved of me, or more precisely, of the way I quietly defied her expectations. Where she saw a straight-laced young man who should be ambitious, athletic, and perfectly groomed for the corporate world, she saw someone soft, pliable, and in need of correction. Everything changed the day she discovered my secret. I had made the mistake of leaving a neatly folded skirt and a small makeup kit on my dresser, thinking no one would ever notice. Claudia, however, had an uncanny ability to see the things others overlooked. One morning, she had barged into my room, her eyes narrowing as they landed on the evidence of my private explorations. I froze, caught like a deer in headlights, unsure if I should lie, apologize, or try to vanish into the floor. Instead, she smiled, a slow, cruel smile that made my blood run cold. "Well, Alex," she said, her tone icy yet amused, "I think it's time you learned what it really means to be refined." That was the moment I understood that my life was about to change in ways I could not control. Claudia had a plan, and it involved transforming my world, and me, completely. I had always been close to Isabella, my girlfriend, and our relationship was one of my few safe havens. Isabella was understanding, witty, and bold in ways I admired. She had always encouraged me to explore my identity, but she had never imagined that exploration could be weaponized against me. The thought of her reaction terrified me as much as it comforted me. She was my ally, yes, but if Claudia succeeded in manipulating my life, could she still see me as the man she loved, or as someone else entirely? The setting for my ordeal began innocuously enough. It was Claudia's sprawling mansion, an imposing structure with high ceilings, ornate chandeliers, and polished floors that echoed with every footstep. The place felt more like a museum of control than a home. She had summoned me under the guise of discussing business matters, but I knew, deep down, that it was about more than architecture or budgets. The tension in her gaze, the meticulous way she arranged her papers, the deliberate pacing of her steps, all screamed power and premeditation. When I arrived, she greeted me with a hug that was far too tight, her perfume suffocating yet intoxicating. "Alex, darling," she said, her tone laced with irony, "you've always been a delicate flower, haven't you?" Her words struck me like a dagger. I forced a smile, trying to appear composed, but the knots of anxiety in my stomach were impossible to hide. Claudia's plan was revealed slowly, deliberately. She didn't yell or threaten outright. Instead, she spoke with the calm authority of someone orchestrating a grand experiment. "You will live as a woman for a while," she said, watching me carefully. "Not as a game. Not as a temporary whim. You will learn grace, poise, and elegance, whether you like it or not." My mind reeled. At first, I thought she was joking. But the cold certainty in her eyes told me she was deadly serious. She handed me a small, leather-bound notebook. Inside were instructions, schedules, and rules: clothing, makeup, posture, speech. Every detail of my day-to-day life was accounted for. It wasn't just about cross-dressing, it was about complete transformation, about erasing the identity I had always known and replacing it with someone entirely new. The initial shock left me numb, but beneath that numbness simmered a mixture of fear and excitement. Part of me was terrified. What would Isabella think? What would my colleagues say if they discovered me? Would I survive the scrutiny? But another part, the part that had always thrived on experimentation, quivered with anticipation. Could I truly inhabit this persona? Could I walk, talk, and breathe as someone else while maintaining a sliver of my original self? That evening, Claudia left me alone in her grand bedroom, which she had prepared for my new life. The closet was stocked with elegant dresses, stockings, shoes, and a variety of wigs, each one more exquisite than the last. Mirrors lined the walls, reflecting not only the physical transformation she demanded, but also the psychological trial I was about to face. I stood there, clutching the notebook, my pulse racing, realizing that the life I had known was over, or at least paused, and that every step I took would be under scrutiny. Isabella called later that night. Her voice was warm, comforting, and full of concern. "Alex, are you okay?" she asked. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Could I tell her that my evil aunt had coerced me into living as a woman, that my secret passion had become a forced trial? Or should I hide it, protect her from worry, and keep this nightmare private? I chose the latter, giving a vague answer that masked the intensity of my predicament. As I hung up the phone, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The pale light of the chandelier cast shadows across my face, highlighting the sharp lines of anxiety etched into my features. I imagined myself in one of the dresses, heels clicking against polished floors, makeup perfectly applied, and a wig framing my face. The thought sent a shiver through me, a mixture of dread and an almost unexplainable thrill. The line between fear and fascination was blurred, and I realized that this forced transformation could push me further than I had ever dared to go. I spent the rest of the night pacing, planning, and imagining the days ahead. Every scenario carried risk: being caught by neighbors, making a mistake in posture or speech, or worse, losing control of my secret entirely. And yet, beneath the fear, a small spark of curiosity burned. How far could I go? How deeply could I inhabit this new identity without losing myself completely? I sank onto the edge of the bed, exhausted, my mind racing. The soft rustle of the dresses in the closet sounded almost like whispers, urging me to explore, to transform, to embrace what was to come. I knew that the days ahead would be long, challenging, and full of suspense, but somehow, I also sensed that they would reveal a side of myself I had never known. And with that thought, I drifted into a restless sleep, unaware that the true challenge, one that would test my courage, my identity, and my relationship with Isabella, was only just beginning. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the heavy curtains of Claudia's mansion, catching on the polished floors and gilded furniture. I awoke with a knot of anxiety tightening my chest. Today would be the first true test of her plan. No longer was this an abstract threat or an idle joke. Today, I would have to begin living as someone entirely new, under the watchful eye of my aunt. Claudia's instructions were clear. The first day would be about establishing a routine, learning the fundamentals of posture, grace, and presence. She had prepared a selection of outfits that ranged from elegant blouses with skirts to delicate dresses. Each ensemble was meticulously arranged, paired with matching shoes and accessories. Standing in front of the mirror, I felt a strange combination of dread and excitement. The skirt she handed me was soft, the fabric sliding easily under my fingers. I could almost feel her eyes on me, imagining every flaw, every hesitation being scrutinized. I hesitated for a moment. Would Isabella ever see me like this? I couldn't risk telling her about Claudia's coercion, yet part of me longed to confide in her, to seek reassurance. Instead, I focused on the task at hand. Carefully, I changed into the outfit Claudia had chosen, a flowing blouse tucked neatly into a pencil skirt, tights smooth against my legs, and low-heeled shoes that felt alien under my feet. Each step was a challenge. I had worn heels before in private, yes, but walking gracefully across a cold, marble floor under the imagined scrutiny of my aunt was a different kind of test entirely. Once dressed, I approached the vanity Claudia had set up for me. The array of cosmetics was intimidating. Powders, brushes, lipsticks, and eyeshadows, each labeled in a precise, almost military fashion. I picked up a small brush, hands trembling slightly, and began applying foundation, attempting to mimic the flawless face Claudia had demonstrated the night before. The reflection in the mirror was a stranger. My face was softened, eyes highlighted, lips colored, yet it still carried my expression, the tension and fear of someone on the edge of transformation. Hours passed as I practiced. Posture, gait, voice modulation, and hand gestures became exercises in concentration. I could feel every muscle in my body recalibrating, my awareness heightened. Each misstep, every wobble in the heels, made my heart race. Claudia's notebook contained not only instructions but illustrations, diagrams of how to tilt my head, hold my shoulders, and move through space with elegance. I repeated the motions again and again, striving for perfection, knowing that any lapse could be met with disapproval, or worse. Lunch arrived in the form of a delicate plate from the mansion's kitchen. Claudia insisted I eat politely, with proper cutlery and posture, as if this were a formal dinner. The tension was suffocating. Every movement felt exaggerated under her expectations, every bite a performance. And yet, I couldn't deny a small thrill. The sensation of inhabiting this persona, even under duress, felt undeniably powerful. I could see, in fleeting moments, the person I was becoming, graceful, controlled, visible in ways I had never dared to be. By mid-afternoon, my aunt returned, inspecting my progress. "Not bad," she remarked, her tone icy but laced with approval. "You're learning quickly, Alex. But remember, this is only the beginning. The world is watching, even if it doesn't know it yet." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I realized that the transformation wasn't just about clothing or makeup. It was about control, perception, and the constant tension between who I was and who Claudia demanded I become. As evening approached, Claudia introduced the first real challenge, a social exercise. I was to leave the mansion and walk through the neighborhood as myself, dressed, made up, and fully transformed. The idea made my stomach churn. Outside, people would see me. Neighbors, strangers, perhaps even friends. The fear of exposure mingled with the secret thrill I had always found in cross-dressing, creating a cocktail of adrenaline and anxiety that left me shaking. Stepping outside, the cool air hit my skin. The sunlight bounced off the sidewalks, highlighting every detail of my appearance. I took a tentative step in my low heels, adjusting my posture instinctively. Every passerby felt magnified, as if they could see through the disguise, through the carefully constructed persona. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, but I forced myself to continue, taking measured steps, practicing Claudia's instructions with obsessive focus. By the time I returned to the mansion, drenched in nervous sweat and a mix of exhilaration and shame, I realized something important. The transformation wasn't just external, it was changing me inside. Each step, each careful gesture, each practiced word was reshaping my sense of self. Claudia had placed me on the edge of a world I had always secretly craved, but now, the thrill was tainted with fear. As I prepared for bed, carefully removing the makeup and changing back into more comfortable attire provided by Claudia, I reflected on the day. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and yet strangely exhilarated. This forced transformation was testing me in every possible way, emotionally, physically, and psychologically. And I knew, deep down, that the days ahead would be far more challenging. But one thought remained constant, flickering in the recesses of my mind. Could I survive Claudia's manipulations, retain my identity, and perhaps, just perhaps, embrace the person I was becoming without losing myself completely. The morning air felt heavier than usual. I awoke to the distant sound of birds and the faint hum of traffic outside Claudia's mansion, but my mind was already racing. Yesterday's lessons had left me physically exhausted, but emotionally restless. The taste of makeup, the feel of tights on my legs, the wobble of heels, all of it had lingered like a vivid dream I couldn't escape. Claudia's control over my life felt suffocating, yet an undeniable part of me wanted to test the limits of this forced persona. Breakfast was a silent affair. Claudia observed me with piercing eyes, evaluating every gesture, every movement. I sat upright, mimicking the posture she had drilled into me, my fingers delicately holding the fork as if it were a fragile artifact. She sipped her tea with a cold precision, her gaze never leaving my face. I felt exposed, like a subject under observation in some cruel experiment. "Today," she said, breaking the tense silence, "you will learn the art of interaction. It's one thing to move gracefully, Alex, but it's another to speak, to captivate, to persuade while maintaining decorum. You will meet people, talk to them, and remain fully in character." Her lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "And remember, anyone could be watching. Never forget your place." My stomach sank. I had barely survived yesterday's walk through the neighborhood without tripping or drawing unwanted attention. Now the stakes were higher. Claudia had arranged a small gathering at a local cafe. People from her social circle, influential friends she deemed worthy of evaluating my progress. I had no choice but to comply. The transformation process began in earnest. I selected a pastel dress, modest yet elegant, with delicate lace trimming. Matching shoes, a clutch, and a carefully styled wig completed the ensemble. I stared at myself in a mirror, turning my head slowly, examining the reflection. My hands trembled slightly as I applied lipstick, trying to recreate Claudia's precise strokes. There was a thrill in seeing this other self, a side of me I had only glimpsed in private, now made public under coercion. By the time we arrived at the cafe, my nerves were frayed. The outdoor seating was bustling, strangers chatting, servers weaving between tables. Claudia guided me to a seat near the entrance, whispering instructions in my ear. "Smile.
Nod.
Make eye contact, but don't linger. Speak softly, but confidently. Remember, elegance. Always elegance." I tried to focus, repeating the mental checklist she had drilled into me. Every movement felt exaggerated, every step in heels deliberate. I felt like a puppet, each string pulled by Claudia's meticulous design. And yet, beneath the fear, a strange exhilaration pulsed through me. People were noticing me, some with curiosity, some with polite indifference, but the awareness that I was visible, performing, and maintaining composure sent shivers down my spine. A server approached, asking what I would like to drink. My voice trembled slightly, betraying the tension I fought to conceal. "A cappuccino, please," I said, curling my fingers delicately around the cup. The server nodded, a polite smile acknowledging my order, and walked away. I exhaled slowly, realizing how every tiny interaction felt monumental. Claudia observed silently from a corner, her expression unreadable. She didn't intervene, allowing me to navigate the world as my transformed self while measuring every reaction. The pressure was suffocating. Every glance, every whispered comment from passers-by, heightened my anxiety. I could feel my heart racing, palms damp, but I forced myself to remain calm, upright, composed, a true test of endurance and poise. Then it happened, a minor misstep. As I reached for my cup of cappuccino, the clutch slipped slightly, and a small sound drew attention from a nearby table. I froze, mortified, imagining that I had revealed my secret in a single, careless gesture. The moment stretched into eternity. The people at the other table glanced momentarily in my direction, then returned to their conversations, oblivious. My body trembled with relief and embarrassment. Claudia's eyes gleamed from across the cafe, approving in that cold, calculating way that told me she had noticed my reaction. After a tense hour of conversation and social navigation, Claudia finally allowed us to leave. The walk back to the mansion was quiet, save for the rhythmic click of my heels on the pavement. I could feel sweat along my hairline, the wig shifting slightly with every step. Every nerve was alive, every muscle coiled with tension. I realized that this exercise had not just tested my appearance or posture, it had tested my courage, my composure, and my ability to inhabit this new identity under scrutiny. Back at the mansion, Claudia had prepared a small study area. "Reflection is as important as action," she said, gesturing toward a mirror. "You must learn to critique yourself. Observe your movements, your gestures, your speech. Note what works and what fails. Improvement comes only with attention and honesty." I spent the next hour practicing in front of the mirror, adjusting the tilt of my head, the angle of my shoulders, the cadence of my voice. Each correction felt both humiliating and strangely empowering. I was learning not just to move as a woman, but to inhabit the persona with authenticity, even under duress. It was exhausting, yet addictive. By evening, fatigue had set in, but so had a new awareness. I realized that this transformation was not merely about clothing or cosmetics. It was about identity, perception, and the psychological power of appearance. Claudia had pushed me to my limits, forcing me to confront fears I had never faced and to explore desires I had long suppressed. As I prepared for bed, removing the makeup and changing into more comfortable attire, I felt a tremor of anticipation. Tomorrow, the challenges would escalate. More interactions, more scrutiny, more forced immersion into a persona that was both foreign and intoxicating. The path ahead promised to test every facet of my courage and self-control. And deep in my mind, a single, persistent thought lingered. Could I maintain my sense of self while living entirely as someone my aunt had created? Or would I begin to lose the boundary between Alex and the woman Claudia demanded I become? The third morning in Claudia's mansion arrived with an unsettling quiet. The grand halls, which had seemed intimidating before, now felt like a cage. My reflection in the full-length mirror caught me off guard. The subtle curves created by padded undergarments, the carefully styled wig, and the makeup that softened my features. All of it made me look like a stranger staring back. And yet, beneath the unfamiliar exterior, my anxiety and fear remained painfully familiar. Claudia was already waiting with a new set of instructions. Today, she said, I would begin practicing conversation under observation, not in public, but with a carefully curated group of her acquaintances invited to the mansion. The idea of people evaluating my appearance, voice, and demeanor while I was fully transformed made my stomach twist in knots. I dressed in a fitted, pastel-colored dress with delicate lace at the cuffs. My shoes were higher than I had worn before, forcing me to focus on each careful step. Claudia's makeup instructions were precise, down to the exact shade of eyeshadow and the subtle curl of eyelashes. I followed her orders meticulously, my hands trembling as I applied lipstick with obsessive care. The reflection in the mirror was impeccable, but only externally. Internally, I was unraveling under the weight of expectation. The guests arrived mid-morning. Elegant women with sharp eyes and poised men filled the sitting room, chatting softly and observing as Claudia presented me to them. "This," she said, her tone both proud and chilling, "is Alex. He has agreed to embrace a new form, to learn elegance, grace, and refinement under my guidance." Eyes turned toward me, and my pulse skyrocketed. I forced a polite smile, tilting my head slightly as I had been taught. Every gesture, every word, every blink was scrutinized. One misstep, an accidental tremor in my hand, a mispronounced word, could betray the chaos swirling inside me. My heart pounded as I attempted to navigate their polite but calculating conversation. A sudden question caught me off guard. "Alex, what inspired you to embrace this transformation?" a woman asked, her voice calm but piercing. I froze, my mouth dry, unsure whether to lie, evade, or confess. Swallowing my fear, I forced a soft smile and replied, I am exploring new aspects of myself. learning to present myself in ways I had never experienced before. The room remained silent for a moment, each guest exchanging glances. My pulse thudded in my ears, but I maintained my composure, nodding politely and responding with careful gestures. Claudia's eyes gleamed from across the room, approving, cold, and sharp. She was watching every micro-expression, every hesitation, and it terrified me. After what felt like an eternity, the conversation moved on. I practiced nodding, listening, laughing lightly, and maintaining eye contact, as instructed. Each movement, each gesture, felt unnatural, yet I sensed that I was beginning to inhabit this persona more convincingly. The thrill of performing, combined with the anxiety of constant observation, created a strange addiction. I wanted to escape, yet I also craved the acknowledgement, subtle as it was, that I was doing well. By late afternoon, Claudia introduced a new exercise, a private photo shoot. She had set up a room with soft lighting, mirrors, and cameras placed strategically to capture every angle. "You must learn to see yourself as others do," she said. "This is not vanity. This is control, awareness, and refinement." Standing under the lights, wearing a flowing dress and heels, I felt exposed in a way that went beyond physical vulnerability. Every pose, every tilt of the head, every smile was evaluated. Claudia corrected the smallest errors, the arch of my back, the angle of my shoulders, the curve of my wrist. I adjusted, repeated, and repeated again, feeling a mixture of humiliation, fear, and a subtle, creeping thrill. During a brief break, I caught my reflection in a side mirror. The woman staring back at me had features softened by makeup, hair perfectly arranged, and a posture that radiated poise. And yet, I could still see the tension, the anxiety, the barely concealed fear beneath the surface. It was a strange duality. Part of me wanted to reject this version of myself, to tear away the clothes and makeup and return to normalcy, while another part craved the approval, the sense of transformation, the strange power in being someone completely different. By evening, exhaustion set in. My muscles ached from hours of standing, posing, and walking in unfamiliar heels. My mind buzzed with sensory overload, the murmurs of guests, the feel of tight clothing, the weight of observation. And yet, despite the fatigue, a spark of curiosity had ignited. Could I continue down this path? Could I survive the social scrutiny, Claudia's demands, and my own conflicting emotions without losing my sense of self entirely? That night, alone in the bedroom prepared for me, I removed the makeup and carefully folded the dress, my hands shaking. I sat on the edge of the bed, reflecting on the day. The forced transformation was no longer a private exploration. It was a public performance, a psychological test, and a constant battle between fear and fascination. Somewhere deep inside, I realized that this experience was beginning to reshape more than my appearance. It was reshaping my thoughts, my awareness, my sense of self. The woman I had become under Claudia's guidance was not just a costume or a mask. She was a living, breathing part of me that I could no longer ignore. And as I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I knew that the days ahead would push me even further, challenging my boundaries, my courage, and the delicate line between Alex and the persona Claudia demanded. The morning light was softer today, but it offered no comfort. Each day under Claudia's control seemed to blend into the next, a relentless sequence of training, observation, and performance. I awoke with a sense of dread, knowing that today would push me further than I had ever imagined. Breakfast was the usual quiet, controlled affair. Claudia sat across from me, her gaze as sharp as a knife. She handed me a folder with the day's instructions. Today's focus: interaction in a public, semi-formal environment with potential acquaintances watching closely. The twist: I would have to manage it largely on my own, without Claudia's immediate supervision. The thought was terrifying. I had been rehearsed, monitored, and corrected at every step, but now I would have to navigate this new world with only the training I had absorbed. I dressed carefully. A fitted, pale pink dress with subtle embroidery, matching shoes, and a delicate clutch. My wig was styled in soft waves, lipstick perfectly applied. Every detail mattered, for even the smallest misstep could lead to humiliation or exposure. My reflection revealed a young woman with impeccable poise, but inside, I was a whirlwind of fear, doubt, and unexpected excitement. Claudia gave me a final, icy smile. Remember, Alex, people are constantly judging. You must appear natural, effortless, and refined. Any sign of discomfort will betray you. Her words, though calm, carried a chilling weight. The location today was a quiet cafe in a busy district frequented by Claudia's acquaintances. As soon as I stepped outside, the world seemed larger, brighter, and infinitely more intimidating. Each passerby's glance felt magnified, every whisper carried meaning. I could feel the adrenaline spike, my muscles tensing with every step. Initially, everything went smoothly. I walked, sat, and interacted according to Claudia's instructions, practicing subtle gestures, measured speech, and careful smiles. But then, a complication arose. An acquaintance of Claudia's, someone I had never met before, approached and struck up a conversation. She was sharp-eyed, intelligent, and her curiosity was unnerving. "You're new here, aren't you?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. I hesitated, unsure of how to respond without revealing my true self or betraying the strange duality I was inhabiting. "Yes," I managed to say softly, forcing a smile. "I'm exploring new experiences." Her gaze lingered, analytical and precise. "Interesting," she replied. "You carry yourself well, very confident for someone new." My heart skipped a beat. Was it praise or a veiled critique? I had no way to know. Every word, every pause, every gesture became magnified under her scrutiny. Then, disaster struck, a subtle misstep that felt monumental. As I rose from my chair to greet a server, my shoe caught the edge of the carpet. I stumbled slightly, clutching my skirt instinctively. My pulse thundered in my ears, imagining that everyone in the cafe had noticed my vulnerability. The woman's eyes flickered with curiosity, but she smiled politely, masking any suspicion. Claudia, were she watching, would have been appalled, but I had survived. Returning to the mansion, I felt an exhaustion that went beyond the physical. My legs ached from hours of heels, my mind buzzed from the constant mental calculation required to maintain composure. But there was also a strange satisfaction. Despite the stumble, I had navigated the challenge, maintained my persona, and learned something crucial. The world did not know my secret, and I had control over the perception of my identity. However, the real challenge awaited at home. Claudia had arranged for a small dinner with her closer friends. This time, the stakes were higher. The environment was intimate, the scrutiny personal. The guests would observe not just my appearance, but my demeanor, conversation, and even my reactions to subtle provocations. I dressed in a more elegant evening ensemble, a deep blue dress, modest yet sophisticated, paired with heels that tested my balance. Makeup was applied with care, every stroke deliberate, every detail exact. The reflection in the mirror was near perfect, but the anxiety beneath it simmered, threatening to boil over. During dinner, Claudia's friends engaged me in conversation, probing gently, watching intently. Questions about hobbies, ambitions, and personal interests forced me to navigate carefully. Every answer had to be measured, natural, and aligned with the persona Claudia had crafted. One misstep, a pause too long, a gesture too hesitant, could unravel the illusion. Halfway through, another close call occurred. One guest, curious about my background, asked about my family. My pulse quickened. Should I fabricate a story? Avoid the question? I chose the middle ground. Vague, polite responses that hinted at normalcy without revealing my secret. The guest accepted the answers, seemingly satisfied, but my heart raced for the remainder of the evening. By the time dinner concluded, I was mentally and physically drained. Yet beneath the fatigue, a new awareness had emerged. I was beginning to internalize this persona, not as a costume but as a way of being, albeit under coercion. Claudia's relentless pressure had pushed me to extremes, forcing me to confront not only public perception but my own sense of identity. That night, as I removed the makeup and carefully folded the evening dress, I felt the weight of duality pressing upon me. Alex, the man I had been, felt distant, almost fragile. The woman I had been forced to become was vivid, confident, and strangely seductive in her presence. The tension between the two identities was growing, and I realized that the next steps Claudia had planned would push me further, testing not just my poise and composure, but the very fabric of who I was. I lay awake that night, imagining what tomorrow would bring. Another social challenge, more scrutiny, perhaps even an encounter with someone who might see through the carefully constructed persona. Fear and anticipation intertwined, leaving me unable to sleep, my mind racing with scenarios, missteps, and potential disasters. And yet, a strange, undeniable thrill pulsed beneath it all. The thrill of transformation, of being someone entirely new, even as I remained trapped under my aunt's control. The fifth day dawned with an unusual stillness. The mansion seemed quieter than ever, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for what was to come. I rose from the bed, still feeling the residual tension of the previous days, the pressure of constant observation, the fear of mistakes, and the peculiar thrill of inhabiting a persona that was both foreign and intoxicating. Breakfast was uneventful, though Claudia's gaze was as piercing as ever. She handed me a set of instructions for the day, a complex social and psychological exercise designed to test my endurance and composure. Today, I would attend a local gallery opening as myself, fully transformed, mingling with guests who were oblivious to the fact that this woman was Alex in disguise. Claudia's instructions were meticulous. Maintain elegance, respond naturally to questions, and never reveal hesitation or discomfort. I selected a flowing emerald dress, its fabric soft and clinging in just the right places, paired with slightly higher heels than before. My makeup was more sophisticated, smoky eyes, subtle contouring, and carefully blended lipstick. Standing in front of the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The reflection was confident, poised, and undeniably feminine. But inside, anxiety churned. What if someone recognized me? What if a misstep exposed the fragile boundary between Alex and this new persona? Claudia escorted me to the gallery. The venue was bustling with guests, some admiring the artwork, others engaged in conversation. I felt exposed, every glance magnified, every whispered word seemingly directed at me. My pulse raced as I navigated the crowd, heels clicking on the polished floors. Each interaction required full concentration, smiling appropriately, nodding at the right moments, modulating my voice carefully. An early challenge presented itself. A group of Claudia's acquaintances approached, their expressions curious, their questions probing. "You're quite new to these events, aren't you?" one woman asked, her tone polite but edged with scrutiny. I nodded gracefully, responding with a calm, measured voice. "Yes, I'm exploring new experiences and learning to appreciate the art world." The answer was accepted, but the tension in my shoulders did not ease. As I moved through the gallery, attempting to blend in, a sudden mishap occurred. A server carrying a tray of champagne accidentally brushed against my arm. The glasses wobbled, sending a few droplets of liquid toward my dress. I froze, heart pounding, imagining the disaster of ruining the carefully chosen outfit. But quick reflexes allowed me to adjust just in time, preserving my composure. The nearby guests seemed oblivious, and Claudia's approving nod from across the room reminded me that control could still be maintained, even under stress. Hours passed, each interaction a delicate balance of poise, conversation, and constant awareness. I realized I was beginning to internalize the movements, gestures, and expressions Claudia had drilled into me. The thrill of performing in public was undeniable, mixed with an undercurrent of fear that kept me alert. I was learning not only to survive, but to inhabit this persona with increasing authenticity. Then, the first true test of my emotional fortitude arrived. Claudia orchestrated a small moment of embarrassment. One of the guests complimented my dress and asked where I had purchased it. The natural response would have been to provide a name or brand, but doing so would reveal that I was unfamiliar with normal shopping, a subtle clue that I was not who I appeared to be. Panic flared in my chest. I took a slow breath, smiled, and replied vaguely, "Oh, it's from a boutique I've been meaning to explore. I really like unique finds." The guest accepted it with a nod, but the tension left me shaken. As evening approached, Claudia guided me back to the mansion for reflection. "You've done well today," she said, her voice cool but not unkind. "But the true test is internal. How you perceive yourself now, under pressure, defines how far you can go. You are changing, Alex. Do not resist it, but do not forget who you are either." I retreated to my room, collapsing on the bed. My body ached from hours in heels, my mind buzzing with the day's events. Yet, amid the fatigue, there was a growing sense of awareness, of power, of performance, and of identity. Claudia's influence was undeniable. She had pushed me to the edge, forcing me to confront fears, desires, and vulnerabilities I had never acknowledged. As I prepared for bed, removing makeup and carefully folding the dress, I stared at my reflection in the mirror one last time for the day. The woman looking back was confident, poised, and undeniably real. And yet, Alex, the man beneath the persona, remained present, observing, questioning, resisting. The duality of my existence was sharper than ever, the tension between fear and fascination, control and surrender, growing with every passing day. That night, as I lay in bed, I understood that the next stage would be even more challenging. Claudia's tests were designed not just to change my appearance, but to reshape my identity, to push me to the brink of self-realization and submission. I knew that the coming days would test my limits, challenge my courage, and force me to navigate the delicate line between who I was and who Claudia demanded I become. And deep in the silence of the night, I wondered, was I beginning to enjoy this transformation, or was it a dangerous illusion, a trap from which I could never escape? The morning arrived with a tension that was almost palpable. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, but it failed to warm me. Every sound, the distant hum of traffic, the rustle of curtains, the faint creak of the mansion floorboards, felt amplified. Claudia's eyes had followed me into the kitchen, her expression unreadable, and I already knew that today would push me to my limits. Breakfast was brief, silent, and meticulously observed. Claudia slid a note across the table. I picked it up with trembling fingers. Written in her precise, angular script was a single directive: "You will attend the charity gala tonight. Alone. No guidance. No mistakes. Alone." The word reverberated through me. For days, Claudia had controlled every moment, every outfit, every gesture, every word. Now, I was to face the public without immediate oversight. Panic and exhilaration collided within me. My mind raced, imagining every possible scenario: missteps, ridicule, exposure. Yet, buried deep beneath the fear was a thrill I couldn't ignore, the intoxicating idea of proving myself, surviving on my own, fully in the persona she had crafted. I spent the day preparing. A fitted black cocktail dress, elegant yet conservative, paired with sleek heels that challenged my balance more than usual. Makeup was precise, hair perfectly styled. I studied my reflection, turning my head slowly, examining posture, facial expression, and hand placement. Claudia had trained me well, yet doubt gnawed at the edges of my confidence. What if I faltered? What if a single gesture betrayed the chaos inside? The drive to the gala was silent. The streets blurred past, my reflection in the rearview mirror a constant reminder of the persona I had become. Each red light, each passing pedestrian, magnified the anxiety thrumming in my chest. By the time I arrived, the gala was in full swing, guests dressed in exquisite evening wear, laughter and music mingling in a perfect, intimidating cacophony. Stepping into the grand hall, I felt the weight of every eye, every unspoken judgment. The room shimmered with crystal chandeliers, polished floors reflecting the swirl of gowns and suits. I adjusted my posture, lifted my chin, and walked forward, heels clicking deliberately on the marble. Each step was an act of courage, each breath a battle against the fear threatening to betray me. Initial interactions were manageable. Small talk, polite smiles, subtle gestures. I navigated them cautiously, testing the boundaries of my confidence. But the gala was designed to challenge me further. A man approached, distinguished and sharp-eyed, his gaze appraising. "I haven't seen you here before," he said. "Do you attend these events often?" I felt my pulse spike. Every muscle tensed, every word scrutinized before it left my lips. "This is my first time," I replied softly, forcing a calm smile. "I'm learning to appreciate the art and culture of these gatherings." He nodded slowly, seemingly satisfied, yet I could feel the scrutiny behind his eyes, like an invisible pressure testing my composure. As the conversation continued, I noticed another complication: a familiar face from the neighborhood. A person who had seen me in my male form prior to Claudia's control was now mingling nearby. My stomach lurched. Recognition could shatter everything, exposing the duality I had struggled to conceal. I forced myself to remain poised, moving gracefully across the room, engaging with other guests, and avoiding direct eye contact with the one who might see through my disguise. Every heartbeat felt louder than the music, every gesture heavier with consequence. It was a tightrope walk over a chasm of potential embarrassment and exposure. Then, a sudden, unexpected twist, the high-stakes moment Claudia had surely anticipated. A photographer, wandering through the gala, turned the camera in my direction, announcing, "May I take a photo of this lovely guest?" Panic surged. A photograph could immortalize me in this persona, accessible to countless eyes, a permanent record of the carefully constructed identity I had fought to embody. I nodded hesitantly, forcing a smile that I hoped conveyed ease. The flash went off. My heart pounded in my chest. Every muscle trembled. I could almost hear Claudia's invisible evaluation, sharp and unforgiving. Had my hand trembled too much? Was my posture perfect? Had my expression betrayed the fear simmering beneath the surface? After the photograph, I retreated slightly, seeking the safety of a quiet corner. The adrenaline coursing through me was intoxicating, mingled with fear so raw it left me breathless. I realized then that Claudia's control had trained me well. My composure, my posture, my gestures, all were near flawless. Yet the psychological strain was immense. Each second of attention, each smile and glance, was a test of endurance, and I was barely holding on. As the night progressed, I navigated more interactions, each subtly designed to probe, test, and stretch my limits. Compliments, questions, veiled observations, all of it heightened my anxiety while simultaneously deepening the strange exhilaration of transformation. I was performing on a stage far larger than the mansion, under scrutiny that could expose me at any moment, and yet I could not stop. The thrill of surviving, of maintaining the persona flawlessly, was addictive. By the time the gala was winding down, exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me. My legs ached from hours in heels, my voice was strained from careful conversation, and my mind buzzed from constant vigilance. And yet, beneath it all, a new awareness had begun to crystallize. This persona, this carefully constructed identity, was no longer just a mask, it was a part of me. The boundaries between Alex and the woman I had become were blurring, the duality sharpening into something both terrifying and compelling. The gala continued to hum with energy, the chandeliers casting sparkling reflections across polished marble floors. I moved carefully, heels clicking softly, every gesture calculated, every smile measured. The adrenaline from surviving the photographer's flash had yet to subside, and I knew the night was far from over. Claudia had prepared me well, but the unpredictability of the world outside her mansion was a challenge that no rehearsal could fully encompass. As I approached a group of socialites gathered around a display of paintings, a sharp pang of recognition hit me. One of the guests, someone I had grown up with in the neighborhood, looked directly at me. My stomach sank. Could they truly recognize me? Would they see through the carefully constructed illusion and expose Alex as the man I had been? I forced myself to smile, keeping my posture perfect, my tone light. "Hello," I said, nodding politely, my voice steady despite the panic boiling inside. Their gaze lingered, inquisitive, almost piercing, but they merely smiled in return and moved on. Relief washed over me briefly, but it was fleeting. The moment reminded me that the thin veneer of my new identity could shatter in an instant. The night pressed on with increasing intensity. Claudia's influence manifested in subtle ways. Guests would pose questions that forced me to navigate delicate topics, comment on my knowledge of art or fashion, or make veiled suggestions that tested my composure. One man approached, holding a glass of wine. "You seem remarkably poised for someone new to these circles," he said. "Tell me, do you often attend such events?" I hesitated for the briefest moment, weighing every word. "I'm learning," I said softly, and trying to appreciate the elegance and artistry of such gatherings. The response was accepted, but the tension in my chest did not ease. Every syllable felt like a negotiation with the world, every gesture a proof of authenticity I feared I did not fully possess. A sudden, unexpected challenge arose. One of the chandeliers above the main hall began to sway slightly, a minor tremor from the old building structure. Guests shifted nervously, some stepping back, but I, in my high heels and carefully balanced posture, lost my footing slightly. My clutch slipped from my grasp, teetering precariously on the edge of the display table. Time seemed to slow. My fingers shot out instinctively, catching it just before disaster. The guests nearby barely noticed, but my heart raced violently. A minor mishap had nearly betrayed me, reminding me how precarious this performance truly was. Claudia's training had prepared me for grace, but nothing could erase the fear that a single moment of imperfection might unravel everything. After recovering, I sought a quieter corner, my pulse still hammering. The duality within me grew more pronounced. The woman in the mirror, poised and elegant, contrasted sharply with Alex, the terrified man clinging to composure. I realized that my internal struggle was now as demanding as the external challenges. Maintaining the persona required constant vigilance, mental agility, and emotional resilience. Then, the night took an even darker turn. Claudia had arranged for an interactive activity, a small auction where guests were invited to participate. I had to place bids, interact with other bidders, and demonstrate poise under pressure. The tension was palpable. Mistakes here could not be hidden, and hesitation would draw unwanted attention. I approached the auction table, heart pounding. The first item, a delicate sculpture, drew bids rapidly. I raised my hand, then paused uncertain. The guest next to me smirked subtly, noticing my hesitation. Panic flared, but I forced myself to steady my hand, raise it confidently, and announce my bid. The room's attention focused briefly on me, and I felt the thrill of surviving yet another challenge. But the relief was short-lived. Claudia's presence, even unseen, was a constant weight. Her approval or disapproval hovered in the shadows of my mind. Each interaction, each word, each smile was filtered through her unrelenting expectations. I was no longer simply attending a social event. I was performing under a microscope, a living experiment in control, elegance, and submission. By the time the auction concluded, exhaustion threatened to consume me. My legs ached, my voice trembled slightly, and my mind felt frayed at the edges. Yet beneath the fatigue, a subtle shift had occurred. I realized that the persona I had inhabited, the poised, confident woman, was no longer entirely a mask. It had begun to intertwine with Alex, shaping my thoughts, my gestures, and my awareness in ways I could not fully separate. The final challenge of the evening arrived unexpectedly. Claudia's most cunning test, a social interaction with a close friend of the family, someone who knew Alex intimately. The friend approached, eyes sharp, curiosity palpable. My pulse spiked. This was the ultimate test. Any slip could reveal the duality I had struggled to conceal. "Alex," the friend began, tilting their head. "Is that really you?" Their tone was playful, yet probing. My stomach twisted. Should I confess, fabricate, or deflect. I chose deflection, a delicate dance of words and gestures. "It's me," I said softly, voice carefully modulated. "I've been exploring new ways to present myself, to experience life differently." The friend studied me, expression unreadable. I held my posture, maintained eye contact, and forced a light, polite smile. A tense silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then, finally, they nodded, apparently satisfied, and moved on. Relief crashed over me, mingled with exhilaration. I had survived the most intense scrutiny of the evening, but the psychological strain left me reeling. As I left the gala, stepping into the cool night air, I felt the weight of the day settle on my shoulders. Claudia's plan was succeeding. Her control, her guidance, and her manipulations had pushed me to the edge, forcing me to confront fear, identity, and vulnerability in ways I had never imagined. The climax of my transformation was approaching, the final stage where mistakes, revelations, and suspense would reach their peak. The drive home from the gala was nearly silent. My mind was a swirl of adrenaline, fear, and exhaustion. Every challenge of the evening played in my head like a highlight reel of near disasters, minor triumphs, and internal debates. I couldn't escape the awareness that Claudia's manipulations had pushed me further than I had ever imagined possible. Each test, each interaction, had chipped away at my former identity, forcing me to confront the uncomfortable truth. Alex, as I had been, was slowly fading, replaced by a persona I had no choice but to inhabit. The mansion loomed ahead, dark and imposing. I stepped inside cautiously, heels clicking on the polished floor, my breath still uneven from the day's events. Claudia was waiting in the foyer, her expression calm but sharp, eyes analyzing every detail of my posture, my expression, and my demeanor. "You've done well," she said, her voice smooth but with an underlying edge that made my stomach tighten. "But now comes the most crucial test." She led me to a room I had not seen before, a private study with large windows and an array of unfamiliar objects, ranging from delicate jewelry to antique mirrors. "Tonight," she said, "you will face a series of personal challenges. Alone. No guidance. Everything you've learned will be tested to the extreme." I swallowed hard, my pulse accelerating. My legs ached, my hands trembled slightly, and my mind raced with scenarios of failure. Claudia's presence, though silent, felt oppressive, like a shadow watching over every move I made. I knew she would judge, evaluate, and correct anything she deemed imperfect. The first challenge was psychological. Claudia handed me a letter and instructed me to read it aloud. The letter was from a close family member, unaware of my transformation, expressing concern and curiosity about my absence and new behaviors. As I read, my heart pounded in my chest. Each word felt like a test, each sentence a potential trigger for exposure. My voice trembled slightly, but I forced it steady, maintaining the carefully cultivated persona. Next, she presented a mirror challenge. I was instructed to examine myself in a full-length antique mirror, speak to my reflection, and articulate my thoughts, fears, and desires as the woman I had become. The exercise was exhausting, emotionally raw, and unnerving. Looking into my own eyes, I saw a mixture of fear, defiance, and a strange, creeping acceptance. Alex's identity wrestled with the persona Claudia had imposed, and for the first time, I questioned where one ended and the other began. Then came the most physically demanding test. Claudia laid out a set of high heels I had never worn before. Narrow, tall, and intimidating. I was instructed to walk, dance, and perform gestures in front of a small group of unseen observers. Each step was a test of balance, control, and composure. My legs shook, my core tightened, and my breaths came in shallow bursts. A single misstep could mean exposure, humiliation, or failure in Claudia's eyes. Midway through the exercise, disaster struck. One heel caught the edge of a rug, sending me stumbling forward. My hand shot out instinctively, trying to catch myself, but the motion was imperfect. I toppled slightly, clutching the edge of a table, my face flushing with panic and embarrassment. Claudia, ever silent, watched from the corner, her expression unreadable. The room seemed to contract around me, every heartbeat magnified, every breath shallow. Recovering, I forced myself to continue, stepping carefully, balancing, moving with deliberate precision. Each successful motion was a small victory, each completed task a reassurance that I could survive even under extreme pressure. Yet, the exhaustion and tension gnawed at me relentlessly. I realized that Claudia's tests were not just about appearance. They were about endurance, control, and the reshaping of my identity at the most fundamental level. By late evening, my composure was fraying. The mirror challenge, the letter, the physical tests, all had pushed me to a psychological brink. My reflection showed a woman who seemed to move and speak with elegance and grace, yet inside, Alex clung desperately to the fragments of self that remained untouched. The duality had become almost unbearable. Then the final twist of the night, a visitor. The door creaked and a familiar voice called out. My heart stopped. Someone from the outside world, someone who knew me before this transformation, had arrived unexpectedly. Panic surged. Any exposure now could unravel everything. My identity, my persona, the painstakingly constructed balance between Alex and the woman Claudia demanded I become. Claudia's eyes gleamed with quiet satisfaction. Handle this, she said softly, almost a whisper. Prove that you can navigate the impossible. The moment was suffocating. The visitor's footsteps grew louder, each one a drumbeat of impending disaster. I adjusted my posture, smoothed my dress, took a deep breath, and prepared to face the confrontation. Every instinct screamed caution, every thought a calculation of words, gestures, and expressions that would preserve the fragile balance I had fought to maintain. In that tense silence, I realized that the next steps, the immediate confrontation, the navigation of suspicion, the preservation of my secret, would define not only the remainder of the night, but the trajectory of my entire existence. The stakes had never been higher, and the risk of exposure had never felt so terrifyingly real. The sound of footsteps on the polished floor echoed through the study like a drumbeat of doom. Each step was deliberate, measured, and painfully close to the threshold of discovery. My heart raced, my palms were damp, and my mind scrambled for a strategy. The visitor's voice, once familiar, now charged with curiosity and suspicion, reverberated against the walls. Alex, the voice called again, softer this time, but with unmistakable recognition. The name hit me like a punch. I froze, poised and trembling at once, as if the air itself had thickened, trapping me in a moment of suspended terror. My carefully constructed persona, the elegance, the poise, the grace, was now under the most severe test of all. Claudia remained in the shadows, her expression unreadable, her presence more intimidating than ever. She had orchestrated this confrontation, I realized, and the weight of her expectations pressed down on me like a physical force. I could either maintain the performance she demanded or risk everything by revealing my true identity. Taking a trembling breath, I forced myself to speak, my voice steady despite the inner storm. It's me, I said, carefully modulating the tone. I've been exploring something new, trying to understand another side of myself. My words were vague, carefully chosen, but the visitor's eyes narrowed, searching for any hint of deception. What do you mean? The voice asked, a mix of curiosity and unease. The visitor stepped closer, peering at me, their gaze cutting through layers of costume, makeup, and carefully cultivated gestures. Every muscle in my body tensed, every instinct screamed caution. One wrong expression, one misstep, could unravel everything. I smiled lightly, tilting my head slightly, hoping to convey calm confidence. I've been learning to present myself differently, to experience life from a different perspective. The words felt strange, foreign, yet somehow empowering. I realized that in that moment, I was not just hiding, I was asserting a part of myself that Alex had never acknowledged before. The visitor hesitated, seemingly considering the explanation. I held my breath, every second stretching into an eternity. Then, unexpectedly, they laughed softly, not mockingly, but with a warmth that momentarily eased the tension. "Well, you certainly look convincing," they said, and the sound of relief was almost physical. I exhaled slowly, my legs trembling as the immediate danger passed. But the reprieve was fleeting. Claudia's next challenge arrived in the form of a phone call, a recorded message from a family member who had learned about my presence at the gala. The message hinted at curiosity and suspicion, a subtle accusation of something hidden. Panic surged again. My mind raced, calculating the potential consequences, the lies I might have to tell, the balance I would need to maintain. I moved carefully, holding the phone with trembling hands, and played the message. The voice on the recording was calm, measured, yet every word was loaded with potential exposure. My reflection in the mirror showed a composed woman, but inside, Alex was fraying at the edges, wrestling with fear, guilt, and exhilaration all at once. Claudia observed silently, a faint smile on her lips. She had created a perfect storm: physical tension, psychological pressure, social scrutiny, and now she watched to see if I could navigate it. My every gesture, every word, every breath was a test. The stakes had never been higher, and the consequences of failure more immediate. Then, another complication, a minor accident that threatened to expose my dual identity. As I shifted to retrieve a pen from the desk, the edge of my dress caught on the corner of the table, pulling slightly and revealing a small but noticeable hint of my former form underneath. My heart leapt into my throat. I froze, instinctively adjusting the dress and pretending nothing had happened. The visitor seemed oblivious, but the close call left my pulse hammering and my mind racing. I realized in that moment that Claudia's lessons had not just been about appearance or social etiquette, they had been about resilience, control, and psychological endurance. Every close call, every test, every near exposure was designed to push me to the edge, forcing me to confront fear and uncertainty while maintaining the illusion of perfection. Hours passed in this high-stakes balancing act. I navigated conversations, handled minor mishaps, and managed the duality of Alex and the woman I had become. Each victory, each successful maneuver, was both exhausting and intoxicating. I felt myself slipping further into the persona. The lines between Alex and the woman Claudia demanded I embody blurring more with each passing moment. By the time the evening began to wind down, I was physically exhausted, mentally drained, and emotionally raw. Yet, beneath the fatigue, there was a strange, undeniable sense of empowerment. I had survived the impossible, maintained the delicate balance under intense scrutiny, and navigated challenges that would have overwhelmed me just days before. But the climax was not yet complete. Claudia's ultimate test, the final confrontation, the moment where exposure, revelation, and transformation collide, was imminent. The mansion felt charged with anticipation, as if the walls themselves sensed the approaching reckoning. Every shadow, every creak of the floor, every flicker of light seemed amplified, signaling that the final moments of the climax were about to unfold. I stood in the center of the study, heart still racing, breath shallow but controlled, aware that the next steps would determine not only the outcome of this night, but the trajectory of my entire existence. The suspense had reached its zenith, the duality of my identity sharper and more dangerous than ever, and the ultimate test, my confrontation with reality, exposure, and transformation, was about to begin. The room seemed impossibly still, yet every nerve in my body was alive with tension. Claudia's eyes followed me from the shadows, silent and unyielding. The visitor had left, but the lingering presence of scrutiny, expectation, and imminent exposure pressed down on me like a physical weight. My heels clicked softly on the polished floor as I moved, each step measured, deliberate, balancing fear and confidence in equal parts. Suddenly, the unexpected, a phone call from Isabella. My breath caught. Hearing her voice, warm yet questioning, stirred a storm of emotions: fear, longing, guilt, and a strange, forbidden thrill. She had no idea about Claudia's manipulations, no idea about the full extent of my transformation. I debated whether to answer, each second stretching longer than the last. Hesitation could betray me, yet answering might open a doorway to exposure. Finally, I lifted the phone, heart hammering. "Hello." My voice was steady, though the tremor underneath betrayed my inner turmoil. Isabella's laughter came through, bright and innocent. "Hey, just checking in. Are you okay? I thought you'd be home hours ago." Panic surged. My mind raced, calculating how to respond without revealing the duality she could never understand. I'm fine," I said carefully. "I just stayed a bit longer at the gala, helping with some follow-ups." Every word was chosen with surgical precision, every pause deliberate, masking the chaos beneath. Isabella's voice hesitated, curious. "Follow-ups?" she asked softly. My pulse jumped. Could I navigate this conversation without unraveling everything? I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Yes, just checking in with a few people. Everything's fine. Don't worry." The call ended, leaving me shaken, yet oddly exhilarated. I realized then that survival was not just about appearances or gestures. It was about psychological acuity, controlling fear, and navigating complex social dynamics under extreme pressure. Claudia had pushed me to this edge intentionally, and I had survived. But the final challenge, the ultimate exposure, was still ahead. Claudia's voice broke the silence. "Now," she said, slow and deliberate, "you will confront your ultimate test." She gestured toward a long, ornate mirror at the far end of the room. My reflection stared back at me, the poised, elegant woman, flawless in appearance, yet trembling with every internal conflict Alex felt. "Speak to yourself," Claudia instructed. "Not as Alex. Not as the man you were. Speak as the woman you are now. Claim her. Understand her." I swallowed hard, stepping closer to the mirror. My eyes met my own, unflinching, as if searching for truth amidst the layers of makeup, hair, and carefully rehearsed gestures. I am both," I whispered, voice quivering. "I am Alex, and I am her. I am learning to live, to exist, to survive in this form. And I can do this." The words resonated in the empty room. For a moment, the tension seemed to ease, replaced by a fragile sense of control. I felt a flicker of empowerment, a recognition that this persona, while imposed by Claudia, had become a part of me in ways I could not ignore. Yet the calm was deceptive. The night was far from over. Just as I began to relax, the unexpected happened. A knock at the door, sharp, deliberate, and authoritative. My heart leapt. Claudia's expression did not change, but the glint in her eyes suggested she had anticipated this final complication. Another visitor, someone entirely unpredictable, had arrived. Fear and exhilaration collided. Every instinct screamed caution, every fiber of my being warned of exposure. I moved toward the door, smooth and graceful, yet inside, my chest pounded violently. I knew that whatever awaited me behind that door would determine the trajectory of everything, my secret, my transformation, and the delicate balance between Alex and the woman I had become. I opened the door slowly, holding my breath. A shadow fell across the threshold, and a familiar figure emerged. Recognition flashed between us, eyes locking in a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and undeniable tension. My mind raced. Could I maintain composure? Could I navigate this encounter without revealing the layers of truth I had spent weeks concealing? The visitor smiled faintly, eyes glinting with knowing amusement. "Well, this is unexpected," they said softly, stepping closer. The room felt impossibly small, the air thick with suspense. Every heartbeat seemed magnified, every breath a struggle to maintain equilibrium. In that charged silence, I realized the truth. This moment, this confrontation, this exposure, this collision of identities, was precisely what Claudia had orchestrated. Every challenge, every test, every near disaster had led to this apex of suspense. And now, at the very brink, the outcome remained uncertain. As the visitor's gaze swept over me, I forced a smile, maintaining posture and grace, though inside, Alex quivered with fear and excitement. Words hung unspoken between us, charged with possibility, revelation, and danger. The night, the transformation, the duality, all converged in a single, electric instant. And then, before anything could resolve, the story froze in suspense. The visitor took a step closer. The mirror reflected two lives colliding, and I felt the fragile veneer of control teeter on the edge. The climax had reached its zenith, leaving everything unresolved, every possibility open, every fear and thrill suspended. The night's events, Claudia's manipulations, and the challenges of the gala had led to this singular, heart-stopping moment. And now, the story waited, poised at the brink of revelation, for the final act, the cliffhanger that would leave viewers desperate to know what happens next. The room was charged with tension, every shadow magnified by the flickering chandelier above. My reflection in the mirror stared back at me, Alex and the woman I had become intertwined in an uneasy balance. Every breath I took felt heavy, every heartbeat loud enough to echo through the space. The visitor remained at the doorway, their expression unreadable, eyes flicking between curiosity, suspicion, and something that made my stomach twist: recognition. Claudia watched silently from her shadowed perch, her presence a constant reminder that this was all part of her carefully constructed plan. She had orchestrated every interaction, every near mistake, every humiliation and triumph to push me to this exact moment. And now, the culmination, the ultimate test of control, identity, and resilience, was upon me. The visitor took a slow step forward, the tension in the air almost unbearable. I maintained my composure, lifting my chin, forcing my shoulders back, and smoothing my dress with a deliberate motion. "Hello," I said, my voice calm, steady, but inside, my nerves screamed in chaotic warning. "Hello," the visitor replied softly, their tone layered with curiosity and something I couldn't immediately place. Recognition lingered in their eyes, but they didn't accuse, didn't judge. Yet, I could feel the weight of their gaze, probing, assessing, as if they were trying to discern the truth buried beneath my carefully crafted persona. I swallowed hard, unsure whether to speak further, to explain, to hide, or to confront. Words felt inadequate, gestures uncertain. Every instinct screamed that a single misstep could unravel everything. Alex, the part of me that still clung to the past, quivered beneath the surface, while the woman I had been forced to become demanded poise, elegance, and confidence. The duality felt sharper than ever, each side pulling in opposite directions. Then, without warning, the visitor's expression changed. Their eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something, recognition? Shock, passing through them. My heart stopped. Had they seen something, glimpsed a hint of the truth? I froze in place, aware that one wrong movement could spell disaster. Claudia's smile was faint but unmistakable. She did not intervene, did not speak. Her silence was the ultimate pressure, a reminder that this encounter, this exposure, was my final challenge. Everything I had endured, every transformation, every lesson, every near disaster, had led to this point. The visitor took another step closer. I could see the subtle shifts in their gaze, the way their eyes scanned me, searching for inconsistencies, searching for answers. My fingers tightened around the edges of my clutch, my breathing shallow but controlled. I had survived everything so far, but this was different. This was immediate, unpredictable, and potentially catastrophic. "Alex, or should I say?" the visitor began, their voice soft but cutting, leaving the question hanging in the air like a knife. My pulse raced. Should I answer? Should I deflect? Should I risk honesty? Each option carried consequences I couldn't fully calculate. Before I could respond, a sudden sound interrupted the moment, a faint creak from the floor above, followed by a muffled voice calling my name. "Isabella." My heart leapt. The timing was impossible, the threat immediate. She had returned early. The delicate balance I had maintained for weeks, the careful persona I had constructed, was now under direct threat of exposure from every direction. The visitor, Claudia, and now Isabella. Panic and exhilaration collided in a chaotic storm. I backed up slowly, maintaining composure, forcing my eyes to remain calm, yet inside, Alex was unraveling, consumed by fear and anticipation. Every step, every movement, was a calculated risk. One slip, one falter, and the truth of my dual existence could be revealed, not just to Claudia, but to Isabella, the visitor, and anyone else who might witness. I could hear footsteps approaching the study door. Isabella's voice, warm but questioning, called again. My mind raced, calculating options, imagining consequences, and desperately searching for a path to preserve the delicate facade. The visitor remained at the threshold, their expression a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and something that made my chest tighten with dread. Time seemed to stretch, every second drawn out like an eternity. I felt the weight of every choice pressing down, the culmination of weeks of manipulation, training, and forced transformation converging into this single, impossible moment. The suspense was unbearable, every instinct screaming that exposure was imminent, yet every ounce of me yearning to survive, to maintain control, to navigate the impossible. And then everything paused. The door creaked open slowly, a shadow falling across the room. Isabella's face appeared, eyes wide, scanning the scene before her. My heart froze. The visitor shifted slightly, Claudia's expression remained unreadable, and I was caught in the center. Every secret, every transformation, every lie teetering on the edge of revelation. The room held its breath, every heartbeat amplified. Every option, every decision, every possible outcome hung suspended in the air. Would Isabella recognize the duality I had tried to conceal? Would the visitor see through the carefully constructed persona? Would Claudia's plan finally reach its climax, exposing all that I had fought to maintain? And in that suspended moment, the instant before truth, recognition, or revelation could strike, the scene froze. The night, the transformation, and the suspense ended not with resolution, but with uncertainty. Who would see the truth first? Would I survive the collision of Alex and the woman I had become? What consequences awaited if the delicate balance shattered? These questions remained unanswered, leaving the story poised on a knife's edge, ready to ignite speculation, debate, and anticipation in every viewer. The story ended for now,